Synchronized sitting.
Synchronized sitting. Sure. Yeah. Figuring out how to zoom in and out. Cameraman's getting technical.
How's it look?
Awesome. Hello to anybody out there that may be watching. Do we have any viewers, Sheldon? Or do you have that information?
Yes, we have Adrian K.
Adrian! How's it going? He's in the UK.
If I pronounce this correctly, Tiske Polstra.
Sure. Hi!
Hi, everyone.
We're just softening into the cameras here. Having finished up our Fascial Pelvis course here in San Francisco. And John has agreed once again to do the live Facebook chat, which we're so appreciative. And we have Rowena with us.
Hi, everyone. Of course, John.
And of course, John. And we're going to go over the assessment of the pelvis, because that's a very important part of myofascial release. And then we're going to go into more about what the Fascial Pelvis course is about. Is that right, Rowena?
Yes, and also kind of tying into women's health, because that's our next seminar that's coming up.
And then our last bit, grand finale, would be the A to Z's of myofascial release. We'll see how that goes. So stay tuned, be lots of fun if you have questions. The purpose of Facebook Live is to connect with all of you wonderful people who can't be here presently, but are still with us in our thoughts, and we can share information a little bit easier live.
It's okay.
So, okay.
What's the deal?
What's the deal?
So we just finished Fascial Pelvis. It's a great course. There's many. The focus of Fascial Pelvis is obviously the pelvis. So I want to ask John here as far as what his take is on the importance of getting your pelvis balanced and how it affects the whole totality of the person.
So the pelvis basically is the second sacral segment, is the center of gravity for us. And if we don't balance the pelvis, no matter what we treat elsewhere, once they get off the table and start to move back in gravity, everything comes tumbling down again. So the techniques we do in Fascial Pelvis and some of the other myofascial courses are essential to balancing and freeing the pelvis. I would say there's no patient that I treat that I don't balance the pelvis during a treatment. Because it's going to take a while, as I just mentioned in class, that our pelvis has been torqued for most of us. Most of our life, it happened at birth or early childhood falls, and nobody paid attention to it. So I'm going to go over assessment a little bit and expand on that a little bit. But the problem is it's been there for so long and so many people, and it's created such a wide range of symptoms that the ligaments get overstretched. This is why the patient must learn to treat themselves. You don't need to treat them regularly. Let them know that these techniques may not hold right away. It's not their fault. They're not failing again. But it's going to take a little time to balance the pelvis and have them strengthened so that their pelvis will eventually hold, and most people, the ligaments will tighten. If you, I don't know if you can focus just on this part of the pelvis. Is that possible? So with a person standing or lying, what we do is find the anterior superior iliac spines, which are right here. So we go through the soft tissue, but gently. Our thumb should be horizontal. And we're looking for levelness. A discrepancy of 1/8 of an inch is significant. And most people are much further than that. So what you get is a twist. In most people, somewhere over 90%, the anterior ilia tends to move this way. The left ilia tends to move posterior.
I could hold it up for you too. I could hold it up for you as well.
Okay. Then we move to the anterior superior iliac spine, which is right there. We place our fingers just under that notch. Again, keep it light. Look at the top of your thumbs. So a whole scenario occurs, if you can hold that for me now. So look at the pelvis is a Latin word for basin. Think about what a basin does. It holds fluid. So you want to keep it really simple. Just look at that person, soften your visual focus, and ask yourself, is this basin in fluid, or is it tilted and spilling fluid? And wherever it's spilling is where the fascial restrictions are. So if my hands are the ilia here, as they torque, that lengthens the leg on this side. This acetabulum is dropped down. That lengthens the leg on that side, and due to the abnormal pull of the myofascial spans, you tend to get an internal rotation of that particular femur, which sends abnormal forces through the hip, knee, ankle, and foot with each step you take. Microtrauma. And my contention is that microtrauma is cumulative over time. It builds and builds till we get a tipping, like the straw that breaks the camel's back, and then all of a sudden things start to go downhill really fast. Then this ilia rotates backwards posteriorly. This draws that acetabulum up. That shortens the leg on that side. And due to the pull of the fascial structures, the femur externally rotates, and that sends abnormal forces down to that hip, knee, ankle, and foot with each step. Now, please hold it here for me. Okay. Then what's very important is that forces the pubic symphysis to shear. As the pubic symphysis shears, all of the powerful musculature that comes up here and attaches into this region no longer has a firm foundation from which to pull against. So we're losing power, we're losing endurance, it's a source of pain and a tremendous energy loss to our body. So that doesn't end there now, starts to then compress the pelvic floor. And when you shorten the muscles of the pelvic floor, which are essential for support of your organs, you start to get into horrible problems like prolapses, pain. Then all of the fascia inside the pelvic bowl starts to tighten and twist. Remember, when the fascia tightens from trauma, it creates tensile strengths of approximately 2,000 pounds per square inch of pressure, crushing pressure on your organs. Around your intestines, the fascia is now tightening like a tourniquet, so it's creating horrible digestive and elimination problems for people. Most menstrual problems have a fascial origin. Pain, sacroiliac problems, etc. It's coming at you.
You still need it?
Now, so then, if you have a long leg, which tends to be on the right, every time you step, the femur is driven up. That drives the ilia up. That jams the sacroiliac, and it gives you what's called an upslip. Less distance between this iliac crest and the rib cage. Everything's crunched down. So those of you who are myofascial therapists, what we tend to do first is we will do a cross-hand release on the upslip. So a lot of people have been dealing with torsions before and they're not holding. The reason is they're paying no attention to the upslip. So when the patient gets off the treatment table and reloads in gravity, that long leg just drives everything back into dysfunction. So do a cross-hand release, 5 minutes or more on the upslip. And then we use these wedges as levers. With the person on their back, the left wedge is under the left iliac crest. The right wedge is lower at an angle under the greater trochanter and comes up to meet the other wedge. Then the body weight, gravity, time, and eventually the therapist's hands help to bring the torque out of the system. Another way of doing this is if the person's on their belly, you position the wedge differently because of the shape of the ilia. So the hand, this wedge goes under at an angle of the left ilia. This one is lower under the greater trochanter, so it's a diagonal. Let them stay on that for a bit, and most of our patients learn how to do this themselves. Now, as a therapist, the sacral spine you might have to come up to look down on this. I'm not sure if there's. Seeing it okay?
And just to get reoriented, the right ilia gets the ASS.
Yeah, the right leg is 244, so this way it's like a fulcrum. It's pulling that back.
Yeah.
This is back posterior, and this is pulling it forward, so it's taking the twist out of this system. Sorry. Then here's the sacral spine, which is right in the middle. You make a claw hand, you touch it lightly, you pull to the left, and you find the ischial tuberosity with your thenar eminence. And like a wheel, you roll that toward the table. You wait until you start to get a softening throughout the sacroiliac on the right. Give it some time. Then eventually this hand doesn't let go, but it slides over to your on the left ilia. So now it's like you have two wheels. You're rolling them in opposite directions. This is incredible, freeing up with plague so many people with their sacroiliacs and lumbosacral area hip pain. So if you get confused, you always go into the open spaces. And then you finish with the lumbosacral decompression. As you remember, you go down into the depth barrier. You never force. You never move fast. And you just feel the resistance. And then you open without sliding till you come to that halt. So the first give you feel, as you know, is the elastic and muscular component. That's what the other forms of therapy thought the release was. But we call it fool's gold because it never lasts. It only releases 20% of the fascial system. So the key, as most of you know, is to hold for 5 minutes, preferably longer. And that's when you start to get into the collagenous barrier, and that's when true healing begins to occur. That's good. Thank you.
So we have Hunter Newman,
Hi, Hunter.
Phil Tabalaki,
Hi, Phil.
Molly Booth,
Wow.
Sarah Wong, north of the border, Sheila Walker, Chris Cobra,
Hi, everybody.
Jeremiah Alejandro, and Garth Whitcomb of Nashville, Tennessee.
Amazing. Does anyone have any questions about my fascial release? About? Any Canadians have any questions about?
We love the Canadians.
My fascial release or fascial pelvis? Radio silence. Rowena, any thoughts or questions?
Well, I just have to say, like, we just finished this course, and I'm actually just sitting on my sit bones for the first time in a very long time. So, you know, balancing your pelvis is just so incredible, and it's so important to your whole well-being. And I'm just grateful to be here. And the next course is women's health, which I've taken several times. So we're excited. And John, can you talk a little bit about, since we're going right into women's health, how important it is to get your pelvic floor and receive myofascial release for all sorts of issues like menstrual issues, endometriosis, infertility, fibroids?
You're talking about the combination of external work and internal work?
Yes.
Yeah. So obviously the external work is extremely important, but the internal work can be vitally important too. So there's so many people that just suffer with menstrual problems. So when you're treating people internally for menstrual problems, let them know you're never going to do any damage, but their period may change. It may come early, may come late, they may even miss a month or two. They may spot, or they may almost hemorrhage with clots coming out. So the body is purifying itself, and it's tell the patient it's nothing to worry about. But that can happen even with cross-hand releases over the belly, like what you would do for endometriosis and that type of thing. So we have helped so many people with horrible menstrual problems. It's really sad they've had to suffer for so long. A lot of women develop cysts, and if you look at our recent brochure, there's a picture of a cyst by our friend, the Polish prince, and his wife had a cyst that the doctor said would have to have surgery. It could not resolve in any other way. And Peter sent her to Kathy Muckman, who's in the Phoenix area near him. 10 treatments, it was gone. The same with cyst in the breast. We can talk about that a little bit later too if you want. But basically, look at cysts wherever it is in your body. They're fascial restrictions. So as the fascial system tightens, it blocks the energetic and fluid flow through our body. So the cyst then is forced to swell. It becomes inflamed. It becomes painful. And too many times, basically, they're cut out. And you hear all the time how they grow back. The reason they grow back is that they never took care of the environment of where the cyst came from, the fascial system. So the internal work is vitally important to help women from many different situations. So many of us have fallen on our butts as kids. We had skiing accidents, all sorts of things happen. When we have this twist of our pelvis, it pulls on the sacrotuberous ligaments and the sacrospinous ligaments that attach to the sacrum and the coccyx. So that pulls the coccyx out of alignment too far forward. The coccyx and sacrum are functionally one. So what happens to one happens to the other. So just imagine for a minute. So what? Go ahead.
Just going to dodge the spine.
The coccyx comes forward. It pulls the sacrum forward. Everything starts to tighten up inside the pelvic bowl. Remember, it's like a pulley system. So the dural system inside the spine, covering the central nervous system, goes all the way up, and basically it becomes your brain. So as that pulley system is pulled forward, it pulls the vertebrae together. That jams the vertebrae together, twists them. Now you've got bulging discs, you've got jamming of facet joints. Your occiput is being rammed into C1, so headaches, fibro fog, I'm sure you've heard of, pressure on your brain, and physiologically you're in severe distress. So you've all heard me say over and over again, find the pain, look elsewhere for the cause. So a lot of your headaches, neck pains is actually coming from here. You start with symptoms, but you always explore the rest of the body and learn its language, and it'll tell you exactly where they need to go. If you look at my fingers, the coccyx, it should have a gentle curve. But if it's been rammed forward, now all the myofascial spans that attach to that area are slackened. That creates a problem with support for your organs, and you can get into horrible situations like prolapses, pain. And everybody's, I'm sure, done Kegel exercises, and what we hear all the time is they stop doing because they didn't work. Because if you don't release the fascia, unfortunately, the Kegel exercises don't work that well. So as we release the fascia, think of this as your coccyx. We release the side, the pelvic floor. If you look at, let me see if I can turn this on. In the women's health seminar, we discussed that this is like a clock. So the coccyx would be 6 o'clock. The pelvic floor would be about 4 to 8 o'clock. Then we actually treat the piriformis from the inside too, and I can talk about that later if you want. And then our friend, the bladder, is up here at 12 o'clock. So what you do is you take, after you release the pelvic floor, you put pressure into the areas like anywhere else in your body that you feel hard or gristly, this ground substance has solidified. After you freed that up, you take the coccyx and you pull it down toward the table. So you pull out the elastic and muscular component, as we've done elsewhere. It comes to that dead hole, the collagenous barrier. We wait, and eventually like a trap door, it starts to open and open and open. It makes such a magnificent difference in most people in a very short period of time. Then get to the bladder, we have to come up this way. The bladder's situated just down and through here. So we put 2 fingers under the bladder, and then we come along the top, come under. So we have the bladder between our hands. The bladder hangs suspended by 11 different ligaments. So it actually unwinds like other parts of your body. But when you have 2,000 pounds per square inch of pressure around your bladder, which is basically a fascial sac that should be capable of expanding and holding fluid for a prolonged period of time, it's being crushed. That can't happen. So what are the effects that we call symptoms? Urgency, frequency, and incontinence.
So it can be very helpful to receive myofascial release for a plethora of conditions.
Oh, there's a big word.
Plethora,
Okay.
depending where you're from. Well,
Do we have any questions from Facebook Live?
We've got a few more people on now. Evelyn Merritt, Marvin Goldbloom, Tricia Powell,
hey everybody, we're
Amanda
just
Dunstan, and Jordan Smith.
awesome. So we're here with John Barnes, the founder of myofascial release, and we just finished a pretty thorough assessment of the pelvic alignment and how that can create a lot of different torque in the spine all the way down to the feet, and how myofascial release treats the whole body. And so you can also backtrack and watch this once this feed is done. You can go back and actually listen to what we talked about if you're just tuning in now. My other hope and dream for this live chat was to do a fun exercise on the A to Z's of my fascial release. Do you guys feel ready for that?
Sure.
Everybody ready?
Can I just ask John one more question?
Absolutely.
John, as far as the new research coming out and consciousness, can you just touch up on that stuff so everyone can actually get your take on that?
Research on consciousness?
Mm-hmm. And fascia and dissection.
Okay. Well, I guess there's been a little talk lately about dissecting, having fascial dissection classes. I guess I just have to ask, what do you learn from cutting up a dead person? If you believe in traditional therapy, it gives you some gross anatomical landmarks, but it has nothing to do with life and consciousness, the fascial system, and that type of thing. So I guess can't be real positive about that, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
You bring up a really good point about that. I studied kinesiology for 3 years at Dalhousie University, and I did do cadaver labs, and I was really interested in becoming involved with sports medicine and heading into the world of maybe becoming a doctor eventually. But I was so unmotivated with that information, and that's just me and how I felt when I was studying those types of things to do the work of having the goal of helping people. And then when I discovered initially massage therapy, it was just so much more inspiring, I guess, to see how helpful that is. And then that layer of discovering your work and how myofascial release even gets into this whole other level of helping people without waiting until they die, which is pretty fantastic. And that's just related to that concept of when you speak of science advances one death at a time, whereas my fascial release advances at every time I put my hands on a patient. It's phenomenal.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not the one that said that. That was Max Planck,
Max
father of
Planck.
quantum physics, back in 1923.
Well, you're the one that told me. So.
I know.
Thanks, Max Planck. Max Planck. Woo.
Yeah, hey, Max. But, what I say along with that, too, is we don't have time to wait any longer, and we don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
Science is beginning to catch up and verify what I've been teaching for over 40 years. But most of this all came from my experience with patients and my intuition. And part of the problem is still with science, as much as they're trying hard, at least some of the newer guys, women are, but they're still fragmented, they're still reductionists, so it's totally artificial. They're not separate systems. So it gives a very confusing, distorted picture. So you have to be really careful of what you're reading in science too. As Magdalena is saying, just touch them. Follow the principles properly, and this magnificent thing begins to happen with human beings. Their consciousness starts to flow through the areas that were blocked. It's not just the blood is blocked, the oxygen, the nutrition when you have fascial restrictions, but it's consciousness, and that's, of course, what keeps us alive. But traditional healthcare doesn't believe in that. It doesn't believe in it just because it was inconvenient. It's not that we don't have consciousness. Then they fooled and said, no, you have consciousness.
Mm-hmm. I'm really excited about what we did earlier this week. There was a student here who had a thermal imaging apparatus, and he actually videotaped John treating one of the students, showing a technique, and it was fascinating to see the body actually light up. So the thermal imaging is showing the effects of myofascial release. So look forward to that video that's coming out.
And that's Richard Hardy, and he also produced Fireside Chat. Very great DVD as well.
Myofascial Release TV.
Myofascial release TV.
That's our next movement.
Yeah.
So consciousness basically consciousness in a human being is not words and thoughts the way we were taught.
Mm-hmm.
It's frequencies of light.
Mm-hmm.
And the microtubules of the fascial system, a good resource is to go to find Dr. Roger Penrose and Dr. Stuart Hammerhoff. They're two of the leading consciousness researchers in the world. And their research is over 20 years old now. and basically has shown over and over again that consciousness flows through the microtubules of the fascial system at an incredible speed. The inside of every microtubule, and how small it is a hollow core. Within the hollow core is fluid. And then, interestingly, the inside of the hollow core is shaped like a vortex. So that fluid is going through as a vortex, which is very powerful. And within the fluid is photons. That's consciousness, light. And so we have been taught in every school you went to, including probably as I'm speaking right now, it's being taught that the fascial system is an insulator. In other words, it doesn't conduct energy. It was proven back in 1940 that the fascial system actually is a superconductor. It's a fiber optic that conducts energy and information to every one of the trillions of cells of our body almost instantaneously. So,
It's good stuff.
yeah.
It's good stuff. So, everybody ready for the A to Z's of my fascial release?
Can't wait.
I can't wait.
I don't even know what
bringing
this
it
is,
up.
but let's find out.
I don't even know what it is either, other than,
She's going to make it up.
yeah, we're making it. Well, you're going to make it up. So I'm going to say a letter of the alphabet. I'm going to probably start with A and end up at Z.
Z.
And then your Z. We'll have to do two. And then I guess we'll get you to say the first word that comes to your mind, and maybe Rowena.
That may not be good.
That may not be good. Well, that's to do with my fascial release. So
Okay.
that's keep it educational. So, and then Rowena will do the same, I guess. Sure.
How do you
So,
I know.
so let's go with A. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you say A?
I don't want to say it.
I think I know what it is.
Asparagus.
You tell me.
Okay, A, awareness came to me for A. Would you like to expand on the
good.
word awareness?
Good. Well, I think I've mentioned to most of you that you might want to read my article or reread it if you've done it a little while ago. Go to our website, myfascialrelease.com, and go to the article section. Read the article. Without awareness, there's no choice. And so we all thought we were so bright. And the problem is that we were functioning out of channel 5, which is our intellect. And all the stuff that's buried in the subconscious, buried in the fascial system, which is the subconscious, nobody paid attention to. So we're being driven by the past, dysfunctions, distortions from the past that we have no conscious control of or awareness. So the more we get treated, the more we get in touch with these belief systems. You don't have to change your belief system. But if it's not working for you, now you can do it. Without that awareness, you can't change your belief system. Then when you change a belief system, it's more than just words. Nature abhors a void, and you need to create a picture. You need to visualize, and you need to feel that visualization for it to become a reality. And all of you, maybe today or tonight, start to quiet yourself down and start to create pictures of what you want. And when you ask people, most people, what they want, they go blank. See, when you're in channel 5, you're really waiting for somebody else to tell you what to think.
B, Rowena.
I think one of my favorite words is balance, where I've learned to balance my left and right brain with my fascial release, which we all know that it's really important to do that and not just be so linear and be so analytical. So B for balance.
B for balance. Wonderful. Do you have anything to elaborate on
Well,
balance?
yeah, so it's also structurally, sorry.
Balance.
We have quite tight fascia. This is what starts to happen. If you're out of balance, the scoliosis is pulling you off your balance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And no amount of meditation or exercise is going to get you back into balance until you free that horrible pressure, free up the osseous structures, and then strengthening begins to work for people.
And do you free up the pressure by going to the barrier?
Yes. What would you do?
So C.
See.
Ooh, consciousness.
Consciousness and chaos.
Ooh.
Oh,
That's a good
Yeah.
one.
can you elaborate on chaos, please?
Bad word. Well, as you know, healthcare is all about order, control, and chaos is a filthy word. Chaos is consciousness is to the healthcare professionals.
Mm-hmm.
So it turns out that in systems theory that you cannot go through any kind of growth, anything that's meaningful in any way, healing, without going into a chaotic period. So as we go into chaos, it's systems theory. We always reorganize at a higher level. So this is where the myofascial therapist helps the patient by allowing their body, they don't force you into chaos, but when you start to destabilize the system, which comes back to what you said is balance, we go into a chaotic period. And as that occurs, all the stuff that's stuck in there starts to come forth. And then you reorganize at a higher level. That's why you feel so much better after you've had a series of treatments. We've talked about the phase transition too. Maybe we should back into that. You okay with that? Sir?
Yeah, we're backing it up.
Back it up.
We tend to zigzag, which may end up being
No
Z.
agenda here.
So we might zigzag
So the reason that it's so
and get
important,
chaotic.
the reason it's so important to hold the structural releases for 5 minutes or longer is there's a number of phenomena that occur that does not occur with any form of therapy. That's why this is so profound and can be long-lasting. So once you engage the barrier, and that's the art of myofascial release, is to engage the barrier. Nobody else is engaging the barrier. They're either plowing through it or sliding over it or rubbing it and all that. And that's nice and it feels good, but it doesn't accomplish anything that lasts.
I'm demonstrating the
Yes,
just rubbing it
oh, thank
over,
you.
not doing much.
So somewhere around the 5 minute period, we go into piezoelectricity, which is a Greek word for pressure electricity. It's a well-known fact that our cells have a crystalline nature. So when you put pressure on a cell, it generates an electrical flow. Our body has a bioelectrical flow. Another word for that's the motion of our mind. That is usually coupled with mechanotransduction. That is where your sustained pressure as the therapist starts to create a biochemical and hormonal flow at the cellular level. So looking at the body as a bag of chemicals, unfortunately, is very limited, and that turns out to be the symptom, the effect. So we keep coming back to the mind, the fascial system, that can have a tremendously profound effect on the biochemistry and hormones of your body. Also, they've recently found that when you hold for 5 minutes or longer through the mechanotransduction process, the mind body of the patient begins to produce interleukin-8, which is the body's natural anti-inflammatory and cancer killer. It's pretty important stuff. And also produces interleukin-1b and interleukin-3, which have to do with increase in circulation and boosting your immune system, so all which are absolutely essential for true healing. So getting back to what we brought up here about chaos, then you move into phase transition. That's the phenomena where ice transforms into water. It's not ice in our body, but it is the solidification of ground substance that was meant to be fluid that nobody paid attention to. So that's the fluid part of the fascial system. That solidification occurs from physical and emotional trauma. It creates crushing pressure that eventually produces symptoms. So in the phase transition, there is a chaotic phase. So again, this is where things shift. And, all my career, I've been attacked, and I think most of you get into MFR, you're going to go through criticism and attack, and don't let it back you off. If you're in your heart, you believe in this, don't let anything stop you. This is too important. This is the healthcare of the future. So basically what I've been told for decades is, well, if what you say is true, science would have to be wrong. The hell of a thought, isn't it? When you look at it, it's embarrassing how wrong it is. We can go on and on about that, but that's not important right now. So it turns out that it was very wrong, and it turns out that you and I were taught, since we were kids, there's 3 phases of water: ice, water, and vapor. But now, through the incredible work of Dr. Gerald Pollack, who's the leading expert in fluid dynamics, there's a fourth phase. It's called liquid crystal. Another word for liquid crystal is fascia. And it is capable of change and going through its chaotic period to allow that to happen. And finally, we reach resonance, which is another word for release. So when you and I touch another person for a sustained period of time with the proper pressure, our vibratory rates initially are quite different, and then eventually our vibratory rates begin to match identically, and that's where the energy flows. The tissue that is solidified starts to rehydrate, the tissue starts to glide, and this is a glide system.
Can everybody hear us okay?
With a Z yet?
So we have Steve.
That's a lot of letters that go
We're on C. No, we just finished C, so now we got D.
So we got a few more people on. We got Steve Michelle,
Hi.
Teresa McVetti,
Hey.
Danielle Dunbar, Janice Rogers, and from Turkey, Baha Holzema.
Amazing. You guys are tuning in to the A to Z's of My Fascial Release. We've gotten to D.
The dirty dog position.
All right, we're going to skip
Isn't
D.
that
We're going to move right on to down dog.
Down dog.
Down dog.
I'm sorry.
The dog
They
might
don't
be
make fun of
dirty.
it. Pushing
The
the
dirty
dog
down
off.
dog position if you're training outside. Yeah.
Downward pressure,
Yeah, down.
deep pressure.
Oh, deep downward pressure. I like it.
How about downward hump? That's a good one.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Compression, depression.
So downward hump, very attractive. Basically what's been happening, unfortunately for these poor ladies, is the fascial system's been tightening up front. It's forcing the head and neck forward. The body responds by becoming fibrotic back here. It gets really thick. Starts out as fluid, and then over time you get that very attractive downward hump. And it's totally unnecessary.
You could treat it with My Fascial Release.
You actually take it and you sort of pump it, and then pull for a while. And
Pump it?
pump it.
That's for our judo. We're going to pump the Dowager's hump. Sorry.
Only works if they have blue hair.
Blue hair? Okay. Wow. Okay.
What's after D?
D is E.
Endometriosis.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Again, fascia restrictions. So cross-hand releases all around the abdominal pelvic area, leg pulls, respiratory diaphragm, the internal work. All of that can make a very substantial difference.
F.
F,
Fascia.
fascia.
Fun.
G.
Goomba.
G?
G.
Who?
Oh, Dr.
G.
G. This is your chance. Drum roll. How do you say it?
You say it again.
Dr. Gimberto.
Gimpato. That
Oh, yeah.
close enough?
That's close. Dr. G.
So I call him Dr. J, as most of you know. He's incredible, and he has done some really wonderful things to advance knowledge and healthcare, and his DVDs are spectacular. It's the first time most of us really ever got to see the fascia of a living person. And what he says in his DVDs over and over again, this represents 25 years of research, that they could find no linearity in the human being whatsoever. No linearity. Yet everything we learned in school was linear, and all the techniques we learned were linear. So we were sent down the wrong road. Everything is fractals. The fascial system has a fractal nature. The nervous system has a fractal nature. The vascular system has a fractal nature. Every one of the trillions of cells of our body is a fractal. Everything in the universe is a fractal. And we got suckered into believing this abstraction of linearity. I have great respect for scientists that develop computers and bridges and all that type of thing. That's linear, that's objective. It's incredible what they can do. But they try to apply these principles to human being, and it can't be done. Just trying to remember what the next one is.
Yeah, I know.
H.
We're on.
A herniated disc.
Ooh, well, I got a couple right now. Herniated disc. Sometimes, if you have neurological symptoms from it, you may need surgery. But again, unless it's in a very acute, horrible situation, always have myofascial release first, just not without a lot of rotation, very gentle, obviously. Because a lot of what they're calling herniations are actually bulges. And we go back to this scenario now of our pelvis, and when it twists, it puts this abnormal pressure on the vertebrae. We get a rotoscoliosis, which bulges the disc out. That puts pressure on the nerve, and we start to have spasm and pain. So always try this first gently, unless it's just beyond hope.
HI. First thing comes to my mind is interleukin 8.
That's good. So look up interleukin 8. It's our natural inflammatory. So we're getting better at this.
We're getting better. Yeah, it's starting to flow. Okay, starting now.
So what used to be called disease, basically, and there's voluminous research now, is basically what disease actually is a thwarted inflammatory response. As you know, inflammation is a very important part of healing. But when that's thwarted, what happens is the ground substance that nobody paid attention to starts to solidify. It causes crushing pressure on pain-sensitive structures. It begins to crush our cells. And now our cells are not receiving the oxygen, nutrition, fluid that they need. And they start to malfunction, and unfortunately that is what people are calling disease and cancer. So, and that, I think saying it's an antiquated phrase is incorrect, because that infers that at one time it was accurate. It was never accurate.
J.
John.
Yeah.
John. J is for John.
J for John.
John F. Barnes. What's F stand for?
Ooh.
I know.
Yeah.
Frederick.
Foster.
Huh?
Foster.
Yes. How'd you know
Foster. John Foster. John Barnes.
that? Foster.
John Foster.
Foster.
John.
It was after John Foster Dulles, who was a diplomat back when my mother and father were conceiving me.
Aw. Thank God for that.
J. K.
Kangaroo.
Kangaroo.
Because Sheldon's from Australia.
Sheldon's from
Our
Australia.
cameraman.
What could a kangaroo possibly have to do with myofascial release?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Pretty powerful beast, I hear.
Pretty powerful.
Could be a power animal.
Could be.
It says the audience if they have any letters that they want to help us with.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Does anyone
K.
come up with
Are you
anything for
awake out
K
there?
besides knee?
Kinks. Kinks. Kinks.
Kinks in the fascial
Curtain.
system.
Like the France,
Yeah.
the drug, isn't it? Yeah.
Curtain.
Our wonderful friend Wendy Arthur had a bad kayaking accident. I think she said that's what it gave her. She had gotten trapped and broke her ankle horribly in the water. She was going into hypothermia and she was trapped there for hours. She almost died. And I think to get her up the cliff, it was so painful, they gave her curtain. And then she started to have some strange hallucinations. Maybe if she's around, let us know. She's doing much better now, but she had to go through surgery and everything. It was really rough. But with that, there's Dr. John Lilly. If you go back in time, Timothy Leary, John Lilly, and Ramdas, who was Richard Albert at the time, were all experimenting with LSD. It was legal back in the 50s in the United States. Then they made it illegal, so Timothy Leary kept taking it and ended up in jail. The Ramdas basically went to India and went into the meditative aspect of things. And Dr. John Lilly, he's the one that developed the communication with dolphins. And did some incredible work in birthing in the water. He's an MD. And he was working with dolphin communication for quite a long time. And he started taking this curtain. First, he was the developer of the sensory deprivation tank, by the way, too.
Oh, cool.
So I've tried that also, but yeah. He would take like 25 doses of acid, go in a sensory deprivation tank,
Oh, wow.
So he has a book called The Scent of the Cyclone. It's a really interesting book if you want to read about it. And he talks about his experiences with that. But he started taking Keratin too, and that took him to some other dimensions, so I don't know too much about it. But the funny thing was there used to be a videotape series called Thinking Aloud. And the interviewer was a really bright guy, very straight guy, but he interviewed some of the leading people in consciousness movement, people like all these other people we just mentioned, and a lot of the leading scientists at the time. Well, anyway, he was going to interview Dr. Lilly. And so here this guy sitting there with his jacket and tie on, and Dr. Lilly shows up in a red leather outfit with red fringe and a coon hat on. The guy's freaking out.
A what hat?
A coon hat, that tail and everything.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You have them up in Canada?
Yeah, we do. We have raccoons.
And the guy's freaking out. And then he would ask Dr. Lilly a question. And it was a normal back and forth like we're doing right now. But then things started to slow down. He would ask Dr. Lilly a question and there would be nothing. And eventually this voice would come through him. It was the most wise thing in the world, but it was like this guy's totally freaked at this time because he's tripping on acid in front of everyone. So I don't know if he's still alive, but he's an interesting guy. You know.
So what did he say?
I don't remember, but
it was
amazing when it came out. It really was, yeah. Mostly about coons.
Cool. Mostly about raccoons. Yeah. So raccoons and kangaroos. Okay. Shall we move on to L?
Love.
You know, that is one thing I definitely feel that myofascial release really connects to the capacity to be able to have love for other human beings that are patients, that are colleagues, that are strangers in the street, and it doesn't need to be a taboo. I feel like there's so much reservation to, tell somebody that you love them, and I don't know, I feel like I have more love since I've discovered my fascial release.
Most importantly,
thank you.
Loving ourselves.
Yeah.
I've learned that a lot, to love myself with this work, so it's really powerful.
Yeah, that's channel 3 as well. Channel 5 is fear. And we've been brought up in fear, performance anxiety, which is fear. This helps us to switch and live in a much more loving way. And I think that the energy that goes through the microtubules of the fascial system is love. So,
which brings us to M, the microtubules of the myofascial system. Keep going. There. You're flowing.
Okay.
Do you want some water?
Yeah, that would be good.
Brace ya? Who's gonna get the water now?
A little tequila.
The vodka.
Do you want some water too, Ruby? Okay.
Microtubules. We talked about that a little bit earlier. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ask them can you ask them if they have any questions about microtubules?
Marilyn? Well, you guys are here too. Any questions on Facebook Live?
All right. Shall that bring us to N? No questions.
Nola roller.
Nola roller. Oh, that's a good tool.
We used to use that as a self-help tool. Then the man that made the Nola rollers, his shoulder got destroyed. So I heard they stopped making them, and then I recently heard that his wife actually is going to make them again. So that's a good self-help tool you can put in your back and roll on it. And the simple little yellow ball we use is great. It's very inexpensive. Cranial cradles help a lot.
And with all these tools, I'm still hanging on to N, a nice way to approach any type of self-treatment. And what my fascial release has taught me as well is to never force. That we create an environment where the body essentially starts to heal itself. So when you're using balls, rollers, any of those things, that tendency to power through could be doing more damage than learning how to treat yourself gently and never force.
Yeah, that's so important. So even light massage, in a way, is forcing the system, which is interpreted by their subconscious, and that shuts them down, as good as it may feel.
Mm-hmm.
They're shutting down in protection, therefore no healing. And that's the problem with all forms of therapy, the temporary nature of it. It's because of that. We have a mind, and a lot of things that we learn, as well-intentioned as we were, as logical as the theory was, their body interpreted that as force, and it went into protection. We can't heal when we're in protective mode. So it's the proper touch, as you're saying, of myofascial release that opens you up to the body-mind opens up. It feels the love coming from your hands, and it feels safe. Let's go.
We're up to ovaries.
I don't have any.
I have some
Onion.
ovaries.
Ovaries. We treat ovaries. We treat cervix. We treat the fallopian tubes. We've had so many people that have wanted to get pregnant. They've gone through all the medical tests and all those procedures are very expensive, and so many times they're very frustrating because it hasn't worked. And what we find over and over again as we release the pressure around the fallopian tubes, just think if my fingers are fallopian tubes, 2,000 pounds per square inch of pressure on a fallopian tube. Sperm can't get in to do the job nature intended, so you can't get pregnant. So we've had a lot of people be able to conceive once they've had myofascial release. Of course, we open up the ovaries and all the surrounding structures too. The other problem that gets in some people's way of conceiving is past abuse. And that emotional holding pattern is still there. And I can get it in the way. They may not even know it is there. So in myofascial release, when this comes up, it never injures, but allows them now to feel, to let it go, to forgive if they can. It creates an emotional holding pattern which actually solidifies the tissue. So a lot of you have been through this, and you finally meet somebody you really love, and you want to be touched. And the moment you're touched, you're back in time being molested by whoever it was. And you can't control it. So this helps you to get that out of your system so you can be yourself again.
I'm going to double down, and I'm going to go into overcome past trauma. OP together. Did you see what I did there?
Oh, you're good.
So are we overcoming past trauma with myofascial release? Is that a way of looking
That's
at
a
it?
way of looking at it, yes.
Thanks.
Which is also present trauma.
Present trauma. Present moment. P. What else?
See, the big term in psychology today basically is re-traumatizing. And see, this never re-traumatizes. What re-traumatizes is talking about it forever. It just drives it deeper every time you talk or think about it. Because you tighten up and you remember that, and the whole system just tightens against it and protects itself. This never traumatizes or re-traumatizes. What it does is free you, just like you're saying. So you have to feel it, though, to let it go. And that's why the therapist is there, to keep you safe, to guide you.
Where was feeling for F? I forgot. We're going to add a little side note for F. There's feeling. It's healing.
Healing is feeling. It's not thinking. It's not making things happen. F is fixing, too. It's not fixing.
It's not fixing.
It's about softening and feeling. And that's the other thing we get into is, in the seminars, is we have to re-educate the patient. We basically conceive pain as life-threatening. And therefore, we drug ourselves, we drink too much talk, too much thinking, anything we can do not to feel, because we were told in our society not to feel, and certainly don't trust your emotions. So, excuse me, you have to get through to your patient, this will never injure you, and you have to repeat that often. And they have to have a control word so they feel safe. So as you know in the seminars, we use the words ease up or hold. And if they ever say that, you'll always do that without judgment. But then you educate, let them know that this is not injurious. The more they feel it, the better, but they can pace it as any way they so choose.
So you're saying that we can potentially help emotional, psychological, physical, mental types of problems through myofascial release, not just through the psychology if there's a psychological problem.
Right. You don't, as you know, you never guarantee anybody in healthcare. You never know what's going to come up. And you never tell people what to think or what to feel or what to do.
Mm-hmm.
You just treat the fascia, and as it comes up, you encourage them to express themselves in a way that's natural for them.
Well, that's very interesting.
And one thing that a lot of people don't really realize is that when they have emotional restrictions or emotional trauma, that obviously it affects your physical and vice versa. And with myofascial release, we take care of all of that and then some. So.
And a bag of chips.
Along those lines, a good book I've mentioned before too. Do we have people here that haven't taken them before?
Yeah, this is a live audience.
Yeah.
Some people who might not even know what myofascial release is, but now they do.
Okay. A good book is called The Molecules of Emotion by a Dr. Candace Pert. She's a scientist that discovered endorphins years ago, so she's no lightweight. And her research for decades has shown that every cell has intelligence, it has memories, it has emotions. And they build through the microtubules of the fascial system at an incredible speed until they eventually connect with our conscious mind. And that's when we start to heal. We need that connection. So thinking about and talking about it just doesn't do it. It helps, but just to a certain point.
Mm-hmm. It's a fragment of the puzzle.
Yes.
Great.
So we're up to Q.
Quantum leap.
Quantum word. Quantum physics, quantum leap.
Mm-hmm.
Quantum mechanics. Quantum seminar next December.
You can register at www.
Call now, they'll get a discount. Well, see, most people are stuck in Newtonian physics, and that has to do with the big world. And those stuck in Newtonian physics don't like to think about the small world because it's a very different world. And so it's myofascial release that really deals with the infinitesimal world of the quantum world. And that's where the changes occur that affect the bigger part of this,
Mm-hmm.
See ya.
Bye.
Yeah. As well.
What are you doing?
Quantum physics is fascinating. Is that my word?
Oh, I was just trying to see if we can get it onto MFR Insight right now.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Just delete. Forget about it. Yeah.
What's going on over there?
Rewind. Oh, I was just trying to get it onto MFR Insight.
We get any complaints about sound or anything?
We're not. Is everyone here okay? Good audio?
Any questions out there?
So far, so good. So we're stuck on Q.
Not sure. Oh.
Still live. Okay.
So we have Tara Hagen-Fields from Ottawa,
Hi, Tara. Hi, Tara.
Jill Gustatus,
Hey,
Marco Fayella,
Awesome.
Jessica McEwen-Colatis.
So all you Ottawa people, there's actually a myofascial release course coming in September, and you can also seek out myofascial release therapists in the Toronto, Ottawa area. Go to myofascialrelease.com.
Why don't you tell them something about your practice?
Well, I am from Whistler, and I've been practicing myofascial release for 6 years. I opened up the Awesome Arts Academy with my partner, which is a healing center and a martial arts center. So we've got jiu-jitsu and capoeira, and close to 3,000 square feet of space where we have people coming in to do Zumba classes. They rent the studio for various events, and my clinic is within that space as well, and I practice myofascial release. I offer intensive myofascial release programs as well, which I was inspired by John's structure where he treats at Therapy on the Rocks and in Malvern, Pennsylvania, where I find the cumulative effect of myofascial release is where a lot of results really start to surface, as opposed to when I used to just do appointments with people once a week or once a month. The progress and the results really that I've discovered with the intensive structure has been phenomenal. And that's the beautiful thing about myofascial release is I feel like you really can't do it too often. You end up almost living myofascial release. You'll end up learning how to be centered and clear out restrictions and pain and things like that. So Awesome Arts Academy in Whistler. It's close to 90 kilometers north of Vancouver, British Columbia. It's in Canada. And come visit.
Beautiful area. Incredible skiing. She's a great athlete. So she'll kick your butt all over the place if you like. And you? What tell us about you?
I'm originally from New York, so I was very fortunate to study with a lot of the old timers in New York. Very fortunate to have their support. And I'm in Las Vegas now. I have a very busy practice, and actually it's R for residents. That's our next letter.
Yay!
Body Residence Myofascial Wellness Center. And we're very busy. I'm very fortunate. I love doing what I do. We get to treat a lot of the Cirque du Soleil performers, dancers, a lot of UFC people as well, the pro athletes that come, and of course your regular Joe Schmo. We have very, very great results. And the reason being is because of all the principles and everything that John has talked about. We have great results because of all this. So if anyone's looking to find a position, we're always expanding. So find me.
Hiring in Vegas. I might
Yes.
talk to you about that.
You do a great job. And she has a wonderful sister that's
Yes.
beautiful and does MFR with an incredible baby, Joy.
Yes.
And your mother, Joy.
Yes. And my whole family is all for MFR. They used to really just kind of thought I was weird, but then,
They got weird.
they kind of accepted it because I don't know if you guys know the story with my father and his aneurysm. Do you know that story, John? Shall I? So yeah, I treated my father, and I just felt a strong aortic pulse, and I just knew that there was something not right there, and we had him checked, and I wanted to get him a CAT scan and all that stuff. And of course the doctor kind of looked at me weird. I was like, how do you know this? Because you can't palpate aneurysms. And lo and behold, that CAT scan showed that he had a 5.3 aortic abdominal aneurysm. So it gives me goosebumps every time I tell the story, because all my training I owe to John, because it saved my father's life. An aneurysm, he could have died instantaneously. So now my father's like a firm believer. Whatever you do, and he refers people to me now. So the work speaks for itself. As myofascial release therapists, we're very enthusiastic about fascia, myofascial release, and helping people and educating people. So everyone out there in Facebook land and social media, look into it. Look up myofascialrelease.com. Find a therapist. MFR directory is there. Find a John Barnes myofascial release therapist. There's a huge difference, because you can't learn this work online, or you can't learn it by watching YouTube as well. So you have to experience it and feel it, and that's the dynamic of this work.
And
as well.
actually touch people.
Yes.
Which is scary. I hear that you can now get a massage therapy certificate online. Has anyone heard about this? It's a little bit interesting to me. I thought you would have to actually get your hands on somebody. But anyways, so RS.
What are we at?
S.
Sheldrake.
Sheldrake. I would like to thank our
Sheldrake.
what's
Rupert
Sheldrake?
Sheldrake.
Rupert Sheldrake.
Rupert Sheldrake. Yes. Rupert.
That's
Of
what she
course.
does, right?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
exactly what I was going to say. Who's that?
You'd like to thank Sheldrake.
Well, before we say that, just her mother and father, you should be I know you're very proud of her. She's
Cambridge University.
Rupert Sheldrake is a scientist from Cambridge University, and he wrote an amazing book called The Presence of the Past, which those of you who are myofascial therapists would probably be interested in, because that's what myofascial release does. We start with the present moment, and as we release the fascia, it takes us into the past. There's unresolved issues that were never totally taken care of. And he has a theory called morphic resonance. And let me back up a little bit, since we have time, or whatever we at.
I have a plane to catch in about 6 hours, so we're good. We got lots of time.
We eat
We'll
lunch.
go through the Philippine alphabet next.
It's the same thing as phonetic, actually.
Now shoulders need to release.
You've probably all heard of the 100th monkey theory. And let me just go through that first, because it has a lot to do with Rupert Sheldrake and his theory. The story is that there was an island off of Japan that had a physical characteristic, but it had a very sharp mountain range. It went right down the middle. So vertical you couldn't get across it. So they were studying this particular species of monkeys. And one of the things they like to do was they would dig things out of the ground. Let's say it's a potato. And they would eat the potato. So one day a monkey was digging a potato out of the ground, and she dropped it and it rolled down a hill and landed in a stream. And the water washed the dirt off the potato. Well, she ate the potato and she liked it that way, so she started to continue to wash her potatoes. Now her little brood was watching this behavior, and they started to wash their potatoes. Then the whole tribe eventually started to wash their potatoes. Hold on a second. Get a little dirt in my mouth from the potato.
From the dirty dog.
Dirty dog, down dirty dog. So when they got to an arbitrary number, let's say 99, when the 100th monkey washed the potato, all of the monkeys on the opposite side of the island started to wash their potatoes. So Rupert Sheldrake's theory is morphic resonance, which means when a certain amount of information is achieved by a particular species, there is a tipping point where they all get it instantaneously. So there's a paradigm shift going on in this world, as you can see, and it's getting pretty agitated out there. And the polarities at the opposite ends dig their heels in and get nastier and nastier. So the myofascial paradigm, we're probably at the 98th or 99th monkey right now, and it's shaking like crazy, and it's happening. But my suggestion for all of you, one of the many reasons we learn to center ourselves, it's going to be a lot of turmoil. There is a lot of turmoil. If you center yourself, you'll be able to get through it, help other people get through it. So this is really important. What's that rest?
T.
T.
Time.
Tensegrity.
Tensegrity. Do we have a... Is there a tensegrity?
Yes, we do.
Right, B.
So we are a tensegrity unit. Thank you.
It's purple. It's his favorite color, too.
Yeah, it is. We can get rid of that. We don't do that. So one of the principles of the fascial system is tensegrity. So that you and I, as a unit, are a tensegrity unit. We're like a myofascial space truss that should be capable of expansion and contraction. Your head, this is why when you learn Kriya work, what you feel is your electromagnetic field going through the bones, and you feel its expansion and contraction. This term was coined by the architectural genius Buckminster Fuller, one of the world's greatest geniuses. He's the one that built the domes, what do they call them? Tensegrity domes, somebody out there help me out. But
I'm
anyway.
not sure.
Huh?
Did he build? I'm not sure.
Yeah, one in Canada. I went there, and you had a World's Fair in 1976 in Montreal, I think. He had just developed
Biodomes?
Huh?
Biodome?
No.
No.
Well, maybe somebody out there.
What did he
Anyway,
build?
it's a tensegrity unit. But every one of the trillions of cells of our body is a tensegrity unit. And it's pumping. Guess what's pumping it? That thing that science doesn't want to deal with, your mind. Your electromagnetic field's the same thing. It's what keeps you alive. How can we forget and ignore something that keeps us alive? How absurd.
Integrity. You.
Geodesic dome, that's what it's called. Geodesic dome.
Oh, cool.
It's an architectural structure like this with an icosahedron type of shape.
Unwinding.
Oh, my favorite.
Tell me about it.
Unwinding?
What's your favorite?
Well, unwinding, it's really hard to describe, but it's your body
She's copying out.
spontaneously
You can do it. You can do it.
spontaneously moving to help heal or fix itself. And it's the most freeing thing in the world to actually let your body do what it needs to heal. So, unwinding, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out our body's moving all the time, but we learn to keep our brakes on and be logical all the time. And you and I in our society were told to never let go of control, as if that was a bad thing. So we try to be good boys and girls, but we exhaust ourselves trying to do that. So the only time that most people ever really let go of control is in the evening when you're so exhausted, you finally fall asleep. You go into the dream state, and that's unwinding. So it's nothing esoteric about it. It's the most natural, normal, important thing. And basically, your body's self-correcting. You move, you thrash around, you drool, you cry, all that type of thing. Your body's self-correcting. But it turns out that one of the other huge missing links in healthcare has been finding positions in space where trauma occurred. So while your body is attempting to do that, sometimes you need a therapist to come along to take gravity out of the system so the body can find a position where you fell off from a tricycle or out of a building or a tree, or deliveries and all that type of thing require your body to be in a position and a therapist there to help you. Unwinding never injures. It will bring up therapeutic pain and therapeutic fear, but what it's bringing up is that information, those feelings that you didn't feel at the moment of trauma because it was just too intense for you. So this completes the process, and then your body can finally start to heal.
Very good.
Thank you.
That was my V.
Okay. There's other V's we can think of.
There are other V's.
That's tomorrow.
Vomer?
Oh, yeah. Vomer.
Well, that's a
Vulva?
Oh, Vomer. It's in here somewhere.
it is.
V for Vomer. You want to go on to W?
Okay.
Ride the wave.
Watts.
Huh?
Watts.